Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss a few of the ways in which Nigel Farage is not enjoying these sort of cost-free benefits he used to with his latest inclusion on BBC's Question Time last night, as well as being utterly exposed by Alastair Campbell, and actually a member of the audience. He still seems to be struggling to work out a consistent approach to Brexit now that we've left the EU. But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So Nigel Farage, I don't think really had the best of it on Question Time last night. He used to be a regular on the show, during the Brexit years, but then everything was hypothetical in the minds of voters. There were lots of things that were definitely going to happen, but in the minds of voters, it's like, oh, well, these people say they won't, so okay, we don't know. But as Alastair Campbell told him, who was also appearing, Nigel Farage is the worst winner in history. Like, Campbell was trying to talk about the damage of Brexit, and Farage instantly jumped in. And I don't just mean talking over him. That happens. I do it too much. When someone's having a discussion and you go, oh, no. No, he was actually just making noises. He wasn't actually trying to make points. He was like, what the hell's that? But anyway, as part of this rambling, he described Brexit as, it was 8 years ago. No, it wasn't. If Remain had won, it would have been 8 years ago. But Leave won. So that means we then had several years of working out how to leave the EU. Then we left. Then we left the Single Market and Customs Union. And now we're living that reality in the present. And we will be next year and the year after. So it wasn't 8 years ago, it's ever present, and it's a part of our past, present and future, and will ever be thus until we join again. He tried to call Campbell a bad loser, but then he fired back, well, Farage is the worst winner because he's never taken responsibility for what he has won, which is the point. It's the same sort of point many of us have been trying to make for years, isn't it? It's all very well Brexit supporters telling us to stop complaining because we lost. It's like, if you lose, you are obviously going to complain. No one likes losing. But why are the so-called winners always complaining? And when Tim Montgomery defected from the Tories to Reform UK earlier this week, Farage latched onto one of the reasons he gave for doing so, that there was too big a gap between what the Conservatives promised and what they delivered. Farage actually echoed this point. What about Farage's promises? He usually gets away with it because obviously his policy promises, he's never in a position to deliver on them, right? So it's easy. It's easy to say what you would do if you had power, if you never have power. But he has made promises that were within his power to either keep or not. If Brexit were a disaster, he promised to leave the UK. That was something he had control over. Granted, other countries might not let him leave the UK, but let's assume he has the power. It's not just a disaster in my estimation. Farage has admitted as much. He's still here. Granted, if you live in Clacton, you could be forgiven for thinking he's left the country. After all, the only time you ever see him is when he's been photographed in America. But no, I'm afraid to report he still lives in the UK. In 2019, he promised not to stand Brexit Party candidates down for the election. No, we're standing them in all these seats. Then he stood them down. In 2024, he said he wouldn't be standing as a candidate in the general election. Then he did. In fact, I would ask this. What promise has Nigel Farage made as a politician that was within his power to keep that he's actually kept? Sure, the Conservatives did not deliver everything they promised, or even much of it. But if there's anyone worse than the Tories at keeping political promises, it could well be Nigel Farage, because I genuinely can't think of a single promise he has made that he's kept. But back to Farage's argument. So he said this major decision was taken 8 years ago. It's like, no, it wasn't. The decision to not be a member of the EU was made 8 years ago. The decision to leave the Single Market and Customs Union was taken 5 years ago. And that was by a minority of voters. The majority voted to have another say on the matter. The decision to leave the Single Market and Customs Union in the way we did was taken 4 years ago, and that decision was never put to the public. And as Campbell carried on calling Farage out on his nonsense, he then tried to claim, well, we'd have joined the euro if you had your way. And it's like, actually, ironically, we are now likely to join the euro. And Farage can own that one as well if he's still alive. We had a permanent opt-out of the euro as an EU member. Brexiteers tried to say, oh, but by this date you have to have joined the euro, right? And this date is now, I think it was sometime in the early 20s. I can't remember what it was. It might have been 2021. Doesn't matter. They say, oh, by this date, every EU member has to be a member of the euro. It's not true, by the way. It was never true. We had a permanent opt-out. But you can also now see it wasn't true because there are EU members who are not part of the euro. Poland, I will keep saying, Poland's been in the EU for like 20 years. How's that euro coming along, Poland? Oh, we'll get round to it one day. But to rejoin, now it's not certain we would definitely have to join the euro because, you know, you can negotiate things, but that is the default expectation. So to even begin talks on joining the EU again, we would have to accept the fact that joining the euro might be a condition, which is why I always say the best way to do this in the future would be from the outset to have two referenda. One is, can we begin discussions? Let us, you know, give the government the power to initiate negotiations to join the EU, but then baked into the law a second referendum on the terms. So when you've concluded the negotiations, these are the terms, put it to the public, a second referendum on are these terms acceptable, right? But the default expectation is we'd have to join the euro. And no matter how much Farage goes on, the reality is Brexit was driven by older people. It's not a sentiment shared by younger generations. We are going to join the EU again. That's just a fact. The only unknown is, are we going to do it in 10 years' time or 20 years' time? You know, there are some political attitudes which change as we get older. I have seen no evidence that anti-EU sentiment develops with age. All the evidence I've seen suggests that with each passing parliament, there's going to be a greater and greater proportion of voters being against Brexit and in favour of joining again. You know, it's happening far too slowly, but we're going to get more honesty in terms of Brexit discussions. The best hope of people like Farage is that they keep milking the issue for as much money, millions, before it happens. And being honest, Farage himself will be absolutely fine, I'm sure. He's already very rich. He's making plenty of money from the divisions he's helped to create. And no matter what happens, no matter when we join, he'll be able to do that for some time to come. And by the time he can't do it anymore, it's fine. He'll already be dead or retired, doesn't matter. But every time he comes onto one of these shows, he's going to find himself called out over his position now, because where Farage struggles now is in discussing Brexit at all. And this was pointed out to him yesterday. See, at no point during the debate was he able to say that Brexit had actually worked out better. His view isn't, his position isn't, Brexit could be better still if I was in charge, but it's still better than if we'd stayed in the EU. No. Brexit, it's like, oh yeah, all this went wrong. We didn't get all the benefits. We just got all the damage. That's his position. Now, I'm not sure if it was Farage himself or someone else. I can't remember, but someone said some years ago, the bare minimum would be that Brexit would work out better than remaining in the EU. Now, whoever it was, Farage is absolutely not in agreement with this now. He said Brexit has turned out worse than remaining. All he has is that Brexit gave potential, which the Tories failed to implement. The fact of the matter is that Farage doesn't really have a Brexit policy. Note how he says that the Tories failed to take advantage of Brexit to get immigration down. But he also says we need to leave the ECHR to deal with immigration. Which is it? In one breath, last night, he was saying that Brexit gave the Tories all the tools they needed. But at other times, he'll say, oh no, but we need to do even madder stuff to actually deal with the issue that I promised Brexit would deal with. You know, he's a snake. And the more people call this out, the more people will see it. There are some people who will never see it. There's not that many of them. You know, and this goes back to what Steve Baker said earlier this week about Farage. He's to a lot of people, he's the guy who sold them a lemon. He didn't say Brexit needed to be handled carefully, that it was possible to be messed up by the government. You know, no, it wasn't. There was nothing about potential before the referendum. It was all going to be easy and marvellous. It wasn't, oh, it'll give us the potential to do this. It was going to do this. It was going to deliver this. And it didn't. Now, I am going to reiterate, because sometimes people think I'm downplaying the threat from Reform UK. I'm not. Farage and Reform UK should be taken very seriously. But the threat can often be overblown. You know, people have said to me, well, what about Donald Trump, right? America has got two political parties as far as elections are concerned. That's it. They've got two. It's a duopoly. And Trump took over one of them. Had Trump tried to become president by making his own party, this MAGA party, and challenging the hegemony, wouldn't have worked. He wouldn't have ever been president. So Farage instantly has a tougher gradient to overcome to replicate Trump's success because he's not taking over. He's like a parasite for the Tories, but he's not trying to take them over, at least not yet. Also, Trump spent years working on his public image with shows like The Apprentice, for example. He deliberately built up a public image, just like Boris Johnson did before he, both Trump and Johnson are quite similar in that they both had a long run up to politics. Farage has been in politics for a long time, and he's spent all those years making himself incredibly divisive. So he's deliberately tried to appeal. He spent his whole career trying to appeal to a narrow subsect of the population because that's all he needed to get the sort of success he wants. But if he wants now to step up and become a much bigger player, he's boxed himself in. Like, he's wildly popular amongst a sizable minority, sure, but not enough to win elections. And here's the real killer for them. Like, if either Starmer or Badenoch cannot establish enough public approval as we draw close to the next election, if they are seen as a net drag, their party can replace them because neither of them have the sort of strong enough support within the party to maintain their position whilst they're clearly not doing it for the party, right? Reform UK are stuck with Farage. It's a total cult of personality. Reform's success is tied to Farage's appeal, and he just doesn't appeal to enough people. And if a second Trump term is as destructive as it could be, Farage could look very shabby indeed. He refuses to take responsibility for the damage of Brexit, which he acknowledges, and then refuses to take responsibility for his support for Trump as well. And Farage has made absolutely no attempt to build bridges with the sort of people he deliberately tried to attack in order to get that small subsect of the voting population on side, which he now needs to bring major success. Right now, the only impact Reform UK are capable of is keeping the Tories focused on being unelectable, which is working. He could win more seats at the next election, sure, and he could take some off Labour, absolutely. But he's a man who has backed Putin, Trump and Brexit, all of which have been bad for the UK. And I look forward to him being called out on all of this and more, much more prominently than has been in the past. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.